The year is 1914. The heir to the throne of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, are on a state visit to Sarajevo in Bosnia. At the time, Bosnia was subjugated and controlled by the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, as was its neighboring country Serbia, and other Slavic nations in southern and eastern Europe. The state visit was meant to smooth out the relations between the Slavic and Austrian people, as the Slavic peoples of southern and eastern Europe were unhappy about their current state of subjugation. The Archduke and his wife met with dignitaries in Sarajevo and attended meetings, all the while traveling around the streets of Sarajevo in an open car. Suddenly, shots ring out. The Archduke's wife is struck and killed. The Archduke is also wounded. In the chaos of the attack, the police arrest Gavrilo Princip, a teenage Serbian nationalist and a member of the notorious resistance group the Black Hand. The Black Hand had plotted to assassinate the Archduke on his trip to Sarajevo. Princip was at the right place at the right time. The Archduke's wife dies in his arms. With his wife dead, the Archduke cries out, "It is nothing, it is nothing," when his aides rush to attend to him and help with his wounds. Shortly after, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austrian throne, dies. And this assassination leads to one of the most pivotal moments in world history. To seek revenge for the assassination of the heir to the throne, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Russia, an ally to Serbia, declares war on Austria-Hungary, while Germany, an ally to Austria-Hungary, declares war on Serbia and the Russian Empire. France, an ally to Russia, declares war on Germany and Austria-Hungary, and Britain, an ally to France, also declares war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Ottoman Empire ally with Austria-Hungary and Germany and declare war on Russia, France, and Great Britain. Sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and fueled by old national rivalries and a stockpiling of military power, Europe is torn apart and plunged into World War I, also known as the Great War.
World War I was known as the first modern war. With the adaptation of new weapons such as machine guns, airplanes, and poisonous gas, it was difficult for generals to find strategies to take advantage of these new weapons, while also keeping their soldiers safe. The combination of these new weapons and old war technique led to the slaughter of millions of soldiers. Armies dug in trenches and charged each other into the area known as No Man's Land. With new machine guns and poisonous gas, these soldiers were quickly slaughtered. Within a 3-year period of 1914 through 1917, no side held an advantage. European and Asian powers made alliances and took sides in the fighting. Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and their allies made up the Central Powers. On the other side, Britain, France, and Russia, along with their allies, make up the Allied powers. Americans overwhelmingly wished to remain neutral and out of the war. The US saw it as a European affair and therefore not worth sending US boys to die in.
While the United States pushed to stay out of the war, the opinions of Americans began to splinter. Most Americans opposed risking US lives without US interests directly at stake. Because the conflict was mostly a European affair, and US interests were not directly threatened, there was no use in sending US soldiers to die in European battlefields. The few groups of Americans who supported US entry into the war felt that as a new world power, the United States needed to flex its muscle on the world stage and protect democracy in Europe. Other splinter groups began to call for support of one group over another. Naturalized immigrants tended to support their countries of origin. German immigrants supported Germany, Russian immigrants supported Russia, and so on. Many Americans, however, felt favoritism towards Great Britain because of our common ancestry, language, and cultural ties. Before long, it became evident that most Americans opposed going to war, but favored an Allied powers victory. By staying out of the war and remaining neutral, U.S. companies profited greatly during the war by sending goods to the Allied powers. The Allied nations bought guns, submarines, explosives, food, and other war goods from United States businesses. As the amount of exported goods dramatically increased to the Allied powers, eventually, U.S. trade to Germany diminished because Germany was fighting against the Allied countries that we supported. The graph here shows how the United States exported goods to most European powers equally before the war. When the war began in 1914, trade to Germany dramatically diminished, while it increased to Great Britain and its allies. We'd rather supply the countries we favored to help them to victory.
To even further strangle out the Germans, Britain had initiated a naval blockade of Germany to keep out food and supplies. The blockade would starve out 750,000 Germans and keep US goods from reaching German markets. To break the blockade, Germany unleashed a deadly new weapon, the U-boat, or submarine. Submarines could sneak up on a ship and destroy it without any notice. Germany announced unrestricted submarine warfare. This is when German U-boats would sink any ship in British waters, regardless of who they were. This put US ships directly in harm's way. This included military vessels as well as passenger liners. It didn't take long for tragedy to strike. On May 7th of 1915, a German U-boat torpedoes the British liner the Lusitania off the coast of Ireland. Nearly 1,200 people are killed, including 128 Americans. Germany justified this act by claiming that it carried munitions. Regardless, US public opinion turns versus Germany. Eager to avoid war, President Woodrow Wilson ignores a call for military action. He threatened to cut off diplomacy with Germany if they didn't cease killing innocents. Ignoring US threats, Germany expanded unrestricted submarine warfare in 1917 to all ships within sight.
Despite the sinking of the Lusitania and the loss of American lives, President Wilson and the American people were still weary of sending American soldiers to die in Europe in a European war. While the Lusitania was unforgivable, Wilson still vowed to wait until Germany had committed an overt act of war against the United States. That overt act of war is the Zimmermann Note in January of 1917. Despite American calls for peace, Germany pushed ahead for open war with the United States due to its favoritism of the Allied powers. On January 16, 1917, Great Britain intercepted a telegram intended for the German ambassador to Mexico. In the telegram, Germany proposes an alliance between Mexico and Germany against the United States. Germany assures Mexico that Great Britain is on the verge of defeat, and that a war against the United States would be quickly won. Do you remember the Mexican Cession from the Mexican-American War? The United States had won land from Mexico that would become Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California. Germany pledged to return this territory back to Mexico once the United States was defeated. The telegram is published in the US media, turning public opinion heavily in favor of war against Germany.
All of these German actions left President Wilson with no choice but to ask for war. With the ensuing Russian Revolution in 1917, Russia bows out of the war, making it easier for Wilson to enter World War I, due to the fact that we're no longer siding with a communist nation, and we're able to make the world safe for democracy. The conflict was now a matter of moral diplomacy, democracy versus evil. With public support behind him, Wilson asked Congress to declare war on April 2nd of 1917. Pledging to make the world safe for democracy, Wilson asserts the war is a moral responsibility and a victory means ultimate peace. He reassures the world that America has no desire for the spoils of war and no selfish ends to serve. This means that America has no desire to gain anything from the war, but see this as a war to end all wars and all future conflicts. Wilson and the American people felt the US had joined World War I to create a new order of peace and freedom through US leadership. And with that, American troops are off to war in Europe.